Welcome to the first broadcast of a new series called 3D-licious. And in this series, I'm going to talk about mostly habits. And good morning, everybody. If you've been around Instagram with me for a minute, you know that this began while I was fitness and nutrition coaching, and I became fascinated / obsessed with behavior change, and I started to explore what influenced it. And at first it was like discipline, and then I was like, oh no, actually it's a little bit more than that. And when you look beyond discipline, it's desire, and then you look beyond desire and there is this belief context that includes how you're thinking, feeling, and talking about it. And then above that is identity, and that's how I somehow started to be a spiritual teacher, which I am very happy to say I'm finally accepting that language and claiming it, where before I was sort of like keeping it in my pocket, doing all my spiritual stuff, and then coming forth with like, well, here's the stuff that's actionable. And I think partly that's because I recognize I can't really explain, or it's outside of my explainableness, and you know I love to explain. So I just sort of accept, and I'm stepping into it. And anyhow, it just came to me to start this other series, 3D-licious. And if you are on a spiritual journey, spiritual path, you might use 3D to describe essentially your physical experience, what you're doing here, what you can see with your five senses. If you watch my other broadcasts, I think that there are 7, so you've got all the ones that you can think of that I sometimes forget when I name, and then you also have the 6th sense, which is essentially your intuition, what you're registering non-physically, and then you have your 7th sense, which is your sense of humor, which is my favorite, and I feel that it makes all the other ones possible. Anyhow, so in this series, 3D-licious, I have been in behavior change. I've been working with the body and mind, and like just generally generating physical results since 2013, which is fucking crazy, man. It's crazy. And I have a lot I think I can offer in simplifying that process. And today's title is Habits Are Made on the Inside. And I'm going to talk about how to think about making or breaking habits that will make it easier. So you have, does anybody have a habit that they're working on that they want to talk about? If not, I'm going to we'll do fitness and nutrition, because I think there's so much, bullshit, to be quite frank, around body image and nutrition and exercise, and like God bless anybody that's alive right now, because it's tough to navigate all that information the way that it's presented, especially if you have something else that you're doing. So I have made this my full-time focus for almost a decade now, and I recognize that other people are busy with other things, so I'm hopeful to provide what I found in a way that you can run with it and do you more. We have trying to quit smoking, thank you, and always leaving one dish in the sink for some reason. Okay, I'm gonna start with you, Madeline, and say, like, what if that was an offering to the gods? And I know that's real silly, but that's what came to me first. And I think we can take this to smoking as well, the other one, where in some ways our first barrier to behavior change is being judgmental about ourselves. We are hard, we feel bad, guilt, shame, etc. when there is this thing that we're doing that we either want to start or stop, and we're not, and we're constantly aware that we're not, and it builds up this huge trunk of junk where it's like, oh, I suck, I can't even do this, I suck. And when we're looking at behavior change, so if you have been around for the journey, for a while I called myself a behavioral metaphysician, and that basically meant I was orchestrating behavior change from behind the scenes, which means the non-physical, which basically means the energy environment, which is, again, kind of like an expression of identity, thoughts, feelings, etc. And so when we're looking at behavior is already several steps away from the actual root cause. The root cause for all behavior, as far as I can tell, is identity. And within that and downstream from that, there are some just training. We're just trained. And you can be trained by the world around you, or you can be trained just through your own sort of like a Roomba almost, like that little vacuum that goes around. Like it learns where the corners are, or it learns where it thinks the corners are, and it creates this program that it follows. So we behave similarly, as much as we want to think we're like the almighty human who's in charge of everything else. Like we're really not even in charge of ourselves, which is hysterical when you slow down and think about it. So with behavior change, the first thing that I suggest doing is make it okay where you are, what you're doing, what you're not doing. So I suggested blessing the remaining dish, or pretending it's an offering to the gods, or to, your higher self, or anything, like whatever it is, with cigarettes or smoking as well, with eating, exercising. Start by letting where you are be okay, and you can do that by changing your perspective. It is only your perspective that's making you miserable. And yet, because there are generally two pieces to most of these things, you could look at what you're not doing and say like, well, it's making me sick, or it's making this harder, or, etc. Yes, of course, yes, we're going to allow that that's true. And at the same time, what if the tension that it's creating is a pivot point in your growth? What if the way that it's provoking you internally is driving you to explore areas of yourself that you wouldn't have otherwise? What if there's a component of compassion? What if you're creating a contrast point to really enjoy health, to enjoy diligence, determination, etc.? And so always start by allowing what you're doing to be right, no matter how wrong it seems. And you can do that like I just did, by kind of put the behavior, put the habit on the table, and then walk around it and use your imagination. Okay, how might this be right? How might this be right? And in some ways, as far as the smoking one, I think you have incredible control over yourself, the person that suggested that, and not having control over yourself in that respect. If you want, maybe you just threw that out to give me something. I don't know if that's true for you or not. But just having the compassion of being able to understand where someone else really wants to do something and isn't able to actually do it can make you behave more compassionately towards others. And you don't even have to express differently. It's just your inner experience can be one of greater love, greater sensitivity. And so I think that it is helpful in general to find or allow that the world that you're living in, the experience that you're having, is your teacher. This is your conversation with, God, the curriculum of coming into the fullness of yourself. What is it talking to you about? What's it teaching you? And I find that in that conversation, you can also reveal elements of yourself. When I talk about being, or when I claim the metaphysical title, what I mean is, for better, for worse, I'm able to see life somewhat thematically. Yes, it is still subjective. No, I am not. No, I'm not the master seer yet. But it can be really interesting to play that game with yourself where you say like, well, if this was a play, if this was a movie, what does the dish symbolize? What does the remaining dish symbolize? What if that was a message from the universe, or God, or your higher self, or however you want to create, like however you want to call it? What if that was a little message for you about something that was happening somewhere else? Are you leaving one other little thing undone? Is there room to allow that 98% completion is enough? Is there room to celebrate that 90% is a lot? Is it okay to celebrate 70% as it compared to the prior 20%? Like, what messaging is that giving you? If you're just joining when I'm talking, this is a new series, as if I didn't have enough running right now, and this one's called 3Delicious, and this is about kind of being in your physical body and at a habit level. So what we're looking at today are habits are on the inside, and the first step I'm talking about is one of inner surrender, inner acceptance. You bless what's bitching you around. The blessing process may take years. Yeah, that's right. It might. I feel pretty awesome. I don't know if you know this. The sheep count me when they count. They can't sleep. Okay, I'm not gonna unpack that right now. Delish. One last dish. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, good job. So it may take years, and okay. If it's gonna take you 5 years, we have this immediacy in our condition, where we've been conditioned in this immediacy. Think next time you open a website that doesn't load instantaneously, just reflect a little on that. What happens internally when that happens? Like, what expectations have you built out right around like immediacy? I started looking at this one thinker. I've been calling him that. I don't know what he calls himself, Marshall something or another. And he said the greatest discovery in the 21st century will be that man is not supposed to live at the speed of light. And I think there is an instantaneous component of our being, and that at any moment we can instantaneously choose joy, choose awareness of our nature through acceptance, through unconditional love. And at the same time, like this 3D stuff, sometimes it takes a little time to move. And sometimes that's because what we've decided to fixate on is only something that we learn to fixate on. Sometimes we get real caught up and this is the problem, focused really tightly on this one thing, and it's not moving, and it's because it's not the problem, it's the symptom. Or it's not, it's time. So, when I first started really driving into this spiritual quest, I pretty much thought that I would be like I thought I'd be like Doctor Stranging stuff, and I still am trying, I'm still intentionally moving that direction. But the way that I thought that I would have control over my inner experience and my outer experience is quite laughable, because I thought I'm gonna be the master of all things, and then poof, here's this, poof, here's that. And again, I'm not giving up on that. I'm intentional that direction. And yet what we're really looking for is not in what comes out of the hand. It is in your relationship to everything. That's the miracle. That's the magic. It's acceptance. It's letting this be right as it continues to evolve. I think and I've never read any of his work, so I don't know if it's fair for me to quote him, but the Chuck or Charles Bukowski or Buwowski or something like that, he says something along the lines of the whole point, or what you come to, is just shut up and enjoy the ride. I think there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of witness, a little bit of witness, little, this experience. It occurs to me in some ways like you're here and you're participating and you control aspects, but not the ones you think you would or could. And thank God, right? Because if you were really in charge, there's such an intricate balance to everything. It's kind of like when somebody takes a prescription medicine, they're bringing it into a system that in many ways is self-balancing. It can throw the whole thing off. Imagine if you were in charge of just dropping stuff in this whole delicate web. I think they have a lot of movies around that where ecosystems get upset because somebody did something that was self-driven. So, in some ways, thank God we don't have that kind of control. And yet we do have, again, layers or levels of control. And the primary one that we're looking at on the spiritual path, I'm sorry to say, you've always had, which is, sorry to say, and hey, cool, isn't this funny to say, you've always had, which is your power to say yes to what is. And in that, you do call upon awareness of your divinity. Why would you be afraid or sad? Isn't it cool? If you just landed in your body today and you were given this experience, how would you interact with life if it wasn't supposed to be a struggle? Wouldn't everything occur to you in many ways as a gift? What a cool experience. I get to do this. Okay, so back to habits. So let's say that you want to make or break a habit. Today I suggested that your first step is coming to one of acceptance of what is not happening. Really allow it to be okay, and you can do that by simply saying, like, I'm going to let this be okay. Or you might need to come up with a story that helps you get there, like a stepping stone of like, well, it could be this or it could be that. And what you're doing there is starting to reduce resistance energetically to what's not happening. If your body is yelling, I need to and I'm not, I'm supposed to and I didn't, I can't stop, etc., like, oh fucks, that will be the experience that you continue to have, because that's what your energy is yelling. And if you start to shift the dialogue a little bit, then you start to shift the possibilities. And again, and kind of stepping wholly into this, like, let me say it from the spiritual side. There are a lot of things I can't, or rather it's this. I'm not interested anymore in exploring the science to explain it. There are other people who sit in those chairs and are inclined those ways, and if you want to approach it from a scientific standpoint, you certainly can. I'm more interested in like the mechanics, like what can we do right now, the practical things, like what does this roll up to, what's the Cliff's Notes of it. Like, I'm not somebody that needs to know, like, here, my books are on the floor right now. This is where I'm at in my life. I'm pretty much only reading fiction because in many ways, like, that's more true to me than science, which continually is transcended. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm reading Jane Roberts' work. I really love that, and some other magical things. But the truth of it is, that information actually is kind of available right now. I think Joe Dispenza talks about it at that level, and some other guys like that, who can give you basically like, here's what's happening energetic, or chemically. I'm not your girl for that, but I am hopeful to give you things that you can. What I would like to be your girl about is like, hey, you have the power. Hey, your being is intelligent enough to guide you along this. Hey, you're your resource. Like, check in with you. Like, have you asked you what makes sense to you? If it wasn't your problem that you were solving, what would you suggest? And if there's any gap in like being able to do that, what if you just breathed in it for a while? What if you just for 2 or 3 weeks took change off your desk and allowed yourself instead to enjoy where you are? That is magical. You want to do some magic? Do that. It would be neat to have a reading list of the stuff you're reading. Thank you. Sometimes I post it. I'm still studying children's literature. I think that is a beautiful medium for just like, it can be so formative if it's ingested early, but as an adult we still got children inside, and that's where our wisdom is, as far as I can tell. Like, that's where our purity is, and I would love to communicate with that part of ourselves. Okay, so that wraps up the first episode of 3D-licious, where we are talking about more tangible-ish approaches to some of your 3D or physical objectives, and today we talked about habits. And again, I am not coming at this from like, oh, I bet this works, maybe this will work. I've been at like thousands of hours with behavior change with myself and clients, and like, I wish it was harder than that, because then I probably wouldn't have had to like phoenix so many times, but it really is as simple. Things are a lot more simple, or a lot simpler than we have been conditioned to allow, and what I suggested today is really just a form of acceptance around what you're doing or you're not doing, and from there things will start to move. And I guess we'll see what happens on this series going forward. But if you have specific questions or habits that you're working on, or we want to take this even more to the 3D, like, show up with it or send me a message. Right now I have 4 other series on youtube.com. Thanks so much. Aw, creative wordplay, thank you. I know, this came in right before I started, and I was like, LOLs. I wish, I don't know if it came to me. I don't know if that generated it or I just caught it. But in any case, on youtube.com/@ShayleeEdwards right now, there is Applied Spirituality. That had been a shorter series, but yesterday it came down onto the floor where it was a longer format. What did we talk about yesterday? Wisdom. And then there is also Let's Be Real About Healing, which is a simplification of the emotional and shadow work type stuff by emphasizing like, hey, what's the main point? Where are we going? Then there is also What Self-Love Got to Do with It, and that one talks about different ways to think about self-love, where to do it. Again, all of the content I'm providing is really about how to think about what you're doing, because it's never the thing, it's always your relationship to your thing, and underneath all your thoughts is still this idea of self. And so that to me is like, that's really the biggest leverage point. But there's so much, you sometimes have to move some things around to even allow that one to start to like saturate. I mean, it's always there, I guess. But in wrapping this up, and then the last series is We're All Here Together, and that one I just kind of show up and say stuff. I work with clients one-to-one and help them connect with themselves. I am a guide to people being their own guide. Yes, of course, I can provide alternative perspectives, some channeled guidance and whatnot, but my objective is really just to empower people to remember who they are and connect them to the wisdom they've always had. And right now, I just posted something actually emphasizing like, talk to me, like if you want to work with me and price is a barrier, like I'm happy to work, like let's figure it out. My calling is towards the new world. I'm intent on realizing the vision. I finally allowed myself to really claim that, like I'm here for like a better place for everybody, and anyone I can positively impact that impacts, like fuck yeah, let's go. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks so much for stopping by.